The blizzard had stripped everything from her, leaving Beatrice Vale half frozen in a snowbank on the outskirts of Las Cruces, New Mexico, her threadbare dress doing nothing against the January cold of 1882. She had trusted the wrong man, a gambler who promised marriage and a new life out west, only to rob her of every cent and abandon her 20 miles from town when the unseasonable storm rolled in from the mountains. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago, her lips were blue, and she could no longer feel her feet in her thin leather boots. Death seemed certain until she heard the steady rhythm of hoofbeats crunching through the snow. Marcus Zimmerman pulled his horse to a halt, his dark eyes widening beneath the brim of his hat as he spotted the woman curled against a rock formation. He had been riding back to his ranch after delivering cattle to Fort Stanton when the storm hit harder than expected. The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots sinking into the fresh powder as he rushed to her side. Her skin was pale as the snow itself, her breathing shallow, and frost had formed on her eyelashes. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice was deep and urgent as he pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her trembling body. When she did not respond, he scooped her into his arms with surprising gentleness for a man of his size. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel her shaking against his chest as he carried her to his horse. Getting them both mounted took some maneuvering, but he managed to settle her in front of him, keeping one strong arm locked around her waist while he guided his mare with the other hand. The ride to his ranch took nearly 2 hours through the blinding snow, and Marcus talked to her the entire way, willing her to stay conscious. He told her about the land, about his horses, about anything he could think of to keep her anchored to life. Her head lolled against his shoulder, but occasionally she would make a small sound that told him she was still fighting. His ranch house came into view just as darkness fell completely, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that he had built with his own hands over the past 3 years. Smoke still rose from the chimney where he had banked the fire that morning. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind them, and laid her on the thick rug in front of the fireplace. His hands worked quickly to build up the flames, and then he turned his attention back to her. Marcus had seen frostbite before, had lost 2 fingers on his left hand to it during a hard winter in Wyoming when he was younger. He knew the dangers of warming someone too quickly. He filled a basin with cool water from his pump and began gently washing her hands and feet, gradually adding warmer water as color started to return to her skin. She groaned in pain as sensation came back, her eyes fluttering open to reveal irises the color of spring grass. "Easy now," he said softly, his rough hands remarkably gentle as he continued his ministrations. "The pain means you are coming back. That is good." "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and dry. "My ranch, about 5 miles outside Las Cruces. I am Marcus Zimmerman. What is your name?" Beatrice Vale." She tried to sit up, but he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stay still. You are not well yet." He draped a thick wool blanket over her and went to heat some broth he had made earlier in the week. When he returned with a steaming mug, he helped her sit up slowly, supporting her back with one arm while he held the cup to her lips. She drank gratefully, the warm liquid seeming to restore some life to her features. As the hours passed, Marcus tended to her with the same care he gave his horses, which was considerable. He prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, helped her eat when her hands shook too badly to hold the spoon, and never once asked what she had been doing out in the storm. When exhaustion finally claimed her, he carried her to his bed, the only one in the small house, and settled her under layers of quilts. He took his bedroll and made himself comfortable by the fire. Beatrice woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and the smell of coffee and bacon. Every muscle in her body ached, but she was warm and alive. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The house was simple but well kept, with sturdy furniture and a few personal touches that spoke of a man who lived alone but took pride in his home. A bookshelf held a surprising number of volumes, and a guitar hung on the wall near the fireplace. Marcus appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who worked hard for his living. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his face was weathered by sun and wind. But it was his eyes that struck her most, dark and intense, yet holding a kindness that made something in her chest tighten. "You look better," he said, handing her a mug. "How do you feel?" "Sore, but alive, thanks to you." She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. "I do not know how to thank you. You saved my life." He settled into a chair near the bed, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "No thanks needed. Could not very well leave you out there to freeze." "You want to tell me what happened?" The whole sorry story spilled out of her then. How she had been working as a seamstress in St. Louis, barely making enough to survive. How Raymond Thatcher had swept into her life with his fine clothes and smooth words, promising to marry her and take her west where they would start fresh. How she had given him her small savings to book their passage, only to discover he had no intention of marrying her at all. He had stolen everything and left her in the middle of nowhere when the storm hit. Marcus listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "This Raymond Thatcher, he is a coward and a thief. You are better off without him, though I know that does not help your current situation." "I have nothing," Beatrice said, her voice breaking slightly. "No money, no possessions except the dress I am wearing, no way to get back home even if I wanted to. I do not know what I am going to do. First, you are going to get your strength back, then we will figure out the rest." He stood and moved toward the door. "I have work to do, but you stay in bed and rest. There is food on the stove when you get hungry. I will be back around midday to check on you." Over the next few days, Beatrice slowly recovered her strength. Marcus was a constant, steady presence, never intrusive but always there when she needed something. He brought her meals, kept the fire going, and in the evenings they would talk. She learned that he was 26, originally from Texas, and had come to New Mexico territory to start fresh after his parents died. He had worked as a ranch hand for years, saving every penny until he could afford his own land. He ran cattle and bred horses, doing well enough to support himself comfortably, but still building toward something bigger. Beatrice found herself drawn to him in ways that surprised her. After Raymond's betrayal, she had thought herself done with men entirely. But Marcus was nothing like the gambler. He was honest and straightforward, his words solid as the ground beneath her feet. He never made her feel like a burden, even though she clearly was. And when he smiled, which was rare but genuine, it transformed his entire face. On her 5th day at the ranch, Beatrice insisted on getting up and helping around the house. Her body still ached, but lying in bed was driving her mad. Marcus had protested, but she was stubborn, and eventually he relented. She cleaned and cooked, mended a tear in his best shirt, and found a strange comfort in the domestic tasks. It felt good to be useful, to repay his kindness in whatever small way she could. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Marcus cleared his throat. "I have been thinking about your situation. Las Cruces is not a big town, but there might be work for you there. I know the woman who runs the general store has been looking for help. I could take you into town tomorrow, introduce you." Beatrice looked at him, something painful twisting in her chest. Of course he wanted her to leave. She had been imposing on his hospitality for nearly a week. "That would be very kind of you," she managed. He frowned, studying her face. "Unless you would rather stay here." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean this is a big ranch for one man to run alone. I could use help with the house, the cooking, the gardens in the spring. I cannot pay much, but you would have room and board, and it would give you time to figure out what you want to do next." He paused, then added quickly, "You would have your own room. I would build a partition, make it proper." "You would do that for me?" Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. "Why?" Marcus looked away, his jaw working. "Because you need help and I can give it, and because I like having you here. The house feels different with someone else in it. Better." She should have been cautious. She barely knew this man, but everything in her was screaming that Marcus Zimmerman was someone she could trust. "I would like to stay if you truly mean it." The smile he gave her then was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I mean it." True to his word, Marcus spent the next week building a partition in the main room, creating a small but private space for Beatrice. He brought in a proper bed frame from town, along with a chest for her belongings, though she had none yet to put in it. He also bought fabric, which made her eyes widen. "You need clothes," he said gruffly when she protested. "Cannot have you wearing the same dress every day. I know you can sew." She made herself 2 simple dresses and a warmer coat, her skilled fingers working quickly. Marcus watched sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, and she found herself very aware of his presence. The house was not large, and they were constantly near each other. She learned his habits, the way he liked his coffee strong and black, how he would read by the fire most evenings, his lips moving slightly as he worked through the words. He had taught himself to read as an adult, he admitted one night, and was still not very fast at it. Without thinking, Beatrice offered to read aloud to him. That became their evening routine. After supper and dishes, she would take one of his books and read while he worked on tack or whittled. His favorite was poetry, which surprised her until she heard how the words affected him. He would stop working, his hands going still, completely absorbed in the rhythm and imagery. It made her see him in a new light, this rough cowboy who found beauty in verse. Winter began to loosen its grip as February arrived. The snow melted, revealing the brown earth beneath, and the days grew fractionally longer. Marcus taught Beatrice to ride, starting her on his gentlest mare. She was terrified at first, but his patience and encouragement gave her confidence. Soon she was accompanying him on short rides around the property, and she began to see why he loved this land. The vast sky, the distant mountains, the sense of space and freedom, it was intoxicating. They worked side by side, mending fences and checking on the cattle that had weathered the winter in the lower pastures. Marcus was a good teacher, explaining everything he did and why. Beatrice found herself fascinated by the ranch work, so different from anything she had known in the city. Her hands grew calloused, her skin bronzed by the sun, and she felt stronger than she ever had in her life. But it was not just physical strength she was gaining. Being around Marcus, seeing his quiet integrity and steady kindness day after day, was healing something broken inside her. She found herself smiling more, laughing at his dry observations about the horses or the weather. And she noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression that made her pulse quicken. One evening in early March, a late storm rolled in, bringing cold rain and wind. They had been riding the fence line and barely made it back to the house before the deluge hit. Both were soaked through, shivering as they stumbled inside. Marcus immediately went to build up the fire while Beatrice grabbed towels. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, his back to her as he coaxed flames from the embers. "You will catch your death." She retreated to her small room and changed into a dry dress, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. When she emerged, Marcus had also changed and was hanging their wet things near the fire to dry. His hair was damp and curling, droplets of water still clinging to his neck, and something about the domestic intimacy of the moment made her breath catch. He looked up and their eyes met. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Marcus cleared his throat and turned away. "I will make coffee." But Beatrice could not let the moment pass. She was tired of pretending she did not feel what she felt, tired of the careful distance they maintained. "Marcus." He stopped, his back still to her. "Yes, look at me, please." Slowly he turned. His expression was guarded, but she could see the longing in his eyes that surely matched her own. "I need to tell you something," she said, stepping closer. "I need to thank you, not just for saving my life in the snow, but for everything since. For giving me a home, for treating me with respect, for making me feel like I matter. I do not know what I did to deserve your kindness, but I am grateful for it every single day." "Beatrice." Her name was rough in his mouth. "You do not need to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because you gave me everything when I had nothing. And somewhere along the way, I think you gave me something else too, whether you meant to or not." He went very still. "What is that?" She closed the remaining distance between them, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Your heart. Or at least I hope you did, because you have mine." Marcus stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "You do not mean that. You are just grateful, confused maybe, after what that man did to you." "I know exactly what I feel," she interrupted, her voice firm. "Raymond was a mistake, a lesson I needed to learn. But you, Marcus Zimmerman, you are real. You are honest and kind and good, and I have been falling in love with you for weeks now. If you do not feel the same, tell me and we will never speak of it again. But if there is any chance you might care for me too." He moved so quickly, she barely had time to gasp before his hands cupped her face and his mouth found hers. The kiss was everything she had imagined and more, gentle but intense, full of weeks of denied longing. His lips were warm and firm, and when she pressed closer, he made a low sound in his throat and pulled her tight against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the day you first smiled at me. I love you, Beatrice Vale. I think I have from the moment I found you in the snow, but I did not think I had the right to tell you, not when you were dependent on me, not when you had been through so much." "You have every right," she whispered, her hands fisting in his shirt. "And I am not dependent on you anymore. I am choosing you, choosing this, choosing us." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt the last of her defenses crumble. This was what love was supposed to feel like, safe and thrilling all at once, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. When his hands moved to her waist, she leaned into his touch, marveling at the tenderness in his calloused fingers. They spent the evening wrapped in each other's arms by the fire, talking and kissing, learning each other in this new way. Marcus told her about his dreams for the ranch, how he wanted to build it into something substantial, maybe raise Appaloosas and sell them throughout the territory. Beatrice shared her own tentative hopes, things she had barely admitted to herself. She wanted a real home, a family, a life filled with love and purpose. "Marry me," Marcus said suddenly, pulling back to look into her eyes. "I know it is fast, but I am sure. I want you as my wife, my partner in all things. Say yes." Beatrice felt joy bubble up inside her, so intense it was almost painful. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Las Cruces, with a handful of Marcus's friends and neighbors as witnesses. Beatrice wore a new dress she had made specially for the occasion, pale blue with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Marcus wore his best suit, his hair freshly cut, looking so handsome it made her throat tight. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Marcus kissed her with such genuine happiness that several of the women in attendance sighed audibly. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful, held at the ranch with food and music provided by their guests. Beatrice met the community she would now be part of, and found them welcoming despite her unconventional arrival. The woman from the general store, Mrs. Harriet Phillips, pulled her aside at one point. "We all know what Marcus did, finding you in the snow like that. Some folks thought he was crazy, taking in a stranger. But I can see he knew what he was doing. You are good for him. He is smiling more than I have seen in all the years I have known him." As the sun set and their guests departed, Marcus swept Beatrice into his arms and carried her over the threshold of their home. Their home now, truly. He set her down gently, his hands lingering at her waist, and she saw nervousness flicker in his eyes. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly, touching his face. "Terrified," he admitted with a shaky laugh. "I want everything to be perfect for you." She kissed him, pouring all her love and trust into it. "It already is." That night, they came together as husband and wife, discovering each other with patience and passion. Marcus was gentle, always making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted what he wanted. Beatrice had never known physical intimacy could be like this, tender and intense, an expression of love rather than something to be endured. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I never thought I would have this," Marcus murmured into the darkness. "A wife, a real partnership. I figured I would work this land alone until I was old and gray." "Well, you are stuck with me now," Beatrice said, pressing a kiss over his heart. "For better or worse, definitely better." She could hear the smile in his voice. So much better. The next months were a whirlwind of activity and adjustment. Beatrice threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, using what little money Marcus had for modest improvements. She planted a garden, started a flock of chickens, and learned the rhythms of ranch life. Marcus taught her to shoot, insisting she needed to be able to protect herself when he was out on the range. She proved to be a decent shot, which pleased them both. They worked together on everything, making decisions jointly about the ranch. When Marcus wanted to buy a new stallion to improve his breeding program, they discussed the finances carefully before committing. When Beatrice suggested they add dairy cows to provide extra income, he considered it seriously and agreed it was a good idea. Their partnership was real, built on respect and trust, and it deepened their love even further. Summer arrived in full force, bringing blazing heat and long workdays. The cattle needed to be moved to higher pastures, and Marcus hired 2 temporary hands to help with the drive. Beatrice ran the house and managed the growing garden, preserving vegetables for the coming winter. It was exhausting work, but satisfying in a way her seamstress job had never been. She was building something that mattered, alongside a man she loved more every day. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Beatrice took Marcus's hand and placed it on her stomach. He looked at her questioningly and she smiled. "There is going to be 3 of us come spring," she said softly. Marcus's eyes went wide, his mouth falling open. We are. Having a baby, yes." The joy that transformed his face was beautiful to see. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A baby, our baby, Beatrice, I cannot believe it. This is the best thing you could have told me." She laughed, happy tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was hoping you would be pleased." "Pleased? I am beyond pleased." I am the happiest man alive." He pulled back to cup her face, his thumbs gentle on her cheeks. "I love you so much. You and our child, you are my entire world now." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Beatrice found herself exhausted more easily as the months passed. Marcus became even more protective, insisting she rest frequently and taking on more of the household tasks. He built a cradle in the evenings, his large hands surprisingly deft with the delicate woodwork. Watching him work with such care and concentration, Beatrice felt her heart overflow with love for this man who had given her everything. Winter returned, though not as harsh as the one that had brought them together. On a cold February night, with a midwife from town and Marcus pacing anxiously outside, Beatrice labored to bring their child into the world. It was long and difficult, and there were moments she thought she could not endure. But thinking of Marcus, of their love, of the family they were creating together, gave her strength. When the baby's cry finally split the air, Beatrice sobbed with relief and joy. The midwife cleaned the infant and placed the tiny bundle in her arms. "You have a son, Mrs. Zimmerman. A healthy, strong boy." Marcus burst into the room, his face pale with worry, and stopped dead at the sight of them. His wife, exhausted but glowing, holding their newborn son. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small face peering out from the blankets. "He is perfect," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you for this gift." She watched as he carefully took the baby, his large hands cradling the tiny body with exquisite gentleness. The love on his face as he gazed at his son made fresh tears spill down her cheeks. This was the man who had found her dying in the snow barely a year ago. Now he was her husband, the father of her child, the center of her world. They named the boy Matthew, and he became the joy of their existence. Marcus was a devoted father, involved in every aspect of his son's care. He would walk the floor with Matthew at night when the baby was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice. He changed diapers and heated bottles without complaint, and the sight of this strong, rough cowboy being so tender with their infant never failed to move Beatrice. As Matthew grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Marcus's reputation as a horse breeder grew, and buyers came from all over the territory to purchase his Appaloosas. The extra income allowed them to expand, hiring permanent ranch hands and building a larger barn. Beatrice took over the bookkeeping, her neat handwriting filling ledgers with careful records of every transaction. Life was not without challenges. A drought in 1884 tested them severely, and they lost several head of cattle. A bad winter the following year brought illness, and they both nursed Matthew through a fever that terrified them. But they faced every obstacle together, their bond growing stronger with each trial overcome. On a warm spring evening in 1885, as they sat on the porch watching 3-year-old Matthew play with a wooden horse Marcus had carved for him, Beatrice leaned against her husband's shoulder with a contented sigh. "You remember the day you found me?" she asked. Marcus wrapped an arm around her, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Every detail. I think about it sometimes, about what might have happened if I had taken a different route home, if I had been a few hours later. I would have died," she said simply. "You saved my life, Marcus." "And you gave me one worth living," he replied. "Before you, I had land and work, but I was alone. I did not understand what I was missing until you were here. You and Matthew, you make everything mean something." She turned to kiss him, deep and loving, not caring that their son was watching and making exaggerated sounds of disgust. When they broke apart, both laughing, Beatrice placed his hand on her stomach. "Matthew is going to need someone to play with," she said with a meaningful smile. Marcus's eyes lit up with understanding and joy. "Again? Already, are you complaining?" she teased. "Never, not for a single second." He kissed her again, then called to their son. "Matthew, come here, we have news." Their daughter, Margaret, was born in early 1886, a tiny thing with her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. Matthew was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. The house rang with noise and laughter now, and Beatrice could hardly remember the woman she had been before Marcus, desperate and alone in the snow. As the children grew, the ranch became a true family operation. Matthew, as soon as he was old enough, began following his father everywhere, learning the work of a cowboy and rancher. Margaret proved to have her mother's way with plants, and together they expanded the garden into something that provided not just for the family but for sale in town. Beatrice also returned to her sewing, making clothes for both her family and taking commissions from women in Las Cruces. The years passed in a blur of busy, happy days. Marcus and Beatrice grew older together, their love maturing and deepening with time. They still stole moments alone when they could, sneaking away for rides across the property or sitting together on the porch after the children were asleep. Physical passion remained between them, but it was now interwoven with profound friendship and partnership. In 1890, when Matthew was 15 and Margaret 9, the ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the area. They employed 6 full-time hands and had expanded their land holdings considerably. Marcus had achieved his dream of being known throughout the territory for his horses, and Beatrice's bookkeeping had kept them financially stable through good years and bad. One evening that spring, as they prepared for bed, Marcus pulled Beatrice into his arms and held her close. She fit against him perfectly after so many years together, and she rested her head on his chest with familiar ease. "You know what day it is?" he asked. She thought for a moment, then smiled. 8 years since we married. 8 years since I made you my wife officially. But 9 years since I found you in the snow. 9 years since my life truly began." Beatrice pulled back to look at him, seeing the silver starting to thread through his dark hair, the lines at the corners of his eyes, and loved him more than she had thought possible. "I used to wonder why Raymond did what he did, why he brought me all the way out here just to abandon me. It seemed so cruel and senseless." "It was cruel," Marcus said, his jaw tightening at the mention of the gambler who had wronged her. "But now I think maybe it had to happen that way. Because if he had not left me in that storm, you would not have found me. We would never have met. Matthew and Margaret would not exist. This life, this beautiful life we have built, it all came from that terrible moment." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair. "I do not believe anyone deserves to suffer like you did. But I am grateful every day that I was the one who found you, that I got the chance to love you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Zimmerman." She kissed him, pouring years of love and gratitude into it. "And you are mine. You gave me everything, Marcus. Not just shelter and food and safety, though you gave me all that too. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me respect and partnership. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. But most importantly, you gave me your heart, and I have treasured it every single day." They made love that night with the practiced ease of long familiarity, but also with the passion that had never truly faded between them. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Beatrice thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From desperate and alone in the snow to safe and cherished in the arms of the man she loved, it seemed impossible, and yet it was her reality. The next decade brought continued prosperity and joy. Matthew grew into a fine young man, eventually marrying a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property in 1895. The wedding was a grand affair, and Marcus and Beatrice stood together watching their son pledge his life to his bride, both remembering their own simple ceremony years before. Margaret blossomed into a beautiful and intelligent young woman, with a sharp mind for business that impressed even her father. She took over more of the ranch's financial management, working alongside her mother and proving even more skilled with numbers. She was courted by several young men, but remained focused on her family and the ranch, in no hurry to marry. In 1898, Marcus and Beatrice celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together their family, friends, and the larger community they had become such an important part of. Their home was filled with laughter and music, and as Beatrice danced with her husband, she marveled at how far they had come. 20 years, she said, smiling up at him. Can you believe it? Best 20 years of my life, Marcus replied, spinning her gently. His hair was fully silver now, and he moved a bit slower than he once had, but his eyes still held the same warmth and love they had from the beginning. Here is to 20 more, but life had other plans. In the spring of 1899, Marcus took ill with pneumonia. Beatrice nursed him frantically, calling for the doctor from town and doing everything she could think of. Matthew and Margaret took over the running of the ranch while their mother sat vigil by their father's bedside. For 2 terrible weeks, Marcus's life hung in the balance. There were moments when Beatrice thought she would lose him, when his breathing was so labored she was sure each breath would be his last. She prayed more than she had in her entire life, bargaining with God, promising anything if only Marcus would survive. And gradually, miraculously, he began to recover. The fever broke, his breathing eased, and color returned to his face. The doctor proclaimed him out of danger, though he warned Marcus would need months to fully regain his strength. Beatrice did not care. Her husband was alive, and that was all that mattered. As Marcus convalesced, they spent long hours together talking about their life and their future. He was quieter than usual, more contemplative, and one day he took her hand with unusual seriousness. When I was sick, when I thought I might die, all I could think about was you, he said. About leaving you alone, I could not bear the thought of it. You did not leave me, Beatrice said firmly. You fought and you won, and you are here. We have more years ahead of us, Marcus Zimmerman. I hope so. But that time made me realize I never properly told you what you mean to me. I have said I love you 1,000 times, but it seems inadequate. You are not just my wife, Beatrice. You are my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, the reason I get up every morning. You took my life and made it full. You took my house and made it a home. You took my heart and kept it safe all these years. Tears streamed down her face as she listened. You did the same for me. I was nothing when you found me, Marcus. Literally nothing, left to die in the snow. You gave me everything. You gave me life itself, and then you gave me reasons to live. Our children, this ranch, our love, it is all because of you. No, he said gently, reaching up to wipe her tears. It is because of us. We built this together. That is what I am most proud of, not the ranch or the horses or any of it. I am proud of us, of what we created together. Marcus's recovery was slow but complete. By summer, he was back to work, though he moved more carefully and took more breaks. Matthew had proven himself more than capable of handling the heavy labor, and Marcus was content to take on more of a supervisory role. He spent more time with his grandchildren, for Matthew and his wife had blessed them with 2 already, and found joy in passing on his knowledge to the next generation. Margaret finally married in 1901, choosing a school teacher from Las Cruces who appreciated her intelligence and spirit. The wedding was beautiful, and Beatrice cried throughout, remembering her own daughter as a tiny infant in her arms. Time moved so quickly. It seemed impossible that her children were now grown with lives of their own. But even as their children moved into their own homes and families, Marcus and Beatrice remained the center of a growing family network. Sunday dinners at the ranch became tradition, with the house full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter echoing through rooms that had once been so quiet. In 1905, on a warm October evening, Marcus and Beatrice sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times over the years. They were both in their 50s now, their hair silver, their faces lined with age and weather. But when Marcus took her hand, the same electricity sparked between them as it had in the beginning. "You ever regret it?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Staying here with me instead of going back east? You could have had an easier life, maybe." Beatrice looked at him in genuine surprise. "Regret? Marcus, how could you even ask that? This life with you, it is everything I ever wanted and more than I dreamed possible. That girl in the snow, she had nothing and no one. You gave her the world. You gave me the world too," he said softly. "I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You taught me what it means to really live." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. The sounds of the ranch settling for the night surrounded them, familiar and comforting. This land, this life, they had built it together from nothing. "Tell me again," Beatrice said, snuggling against his shoulder. "Tell me about the day you found me." Marcus smiled, knowing she loved this story even though she had heard it 100 times. "It was snowing so hard I could barely see. I was thinking about getting home, getting warm, cursing myself for not leaving Fort Stanton earlier. And then I saw something dark against the snow, just a shape that did not belong. When I got closer and realized it was a woman, my heart nearly stopped. What did you think?" She prompted, as she always did. "I thought I was too late. You were so still, so pale. But then I saw you breathe just barely, and I knew I had to act fast. I wrapped you in my coat, got you on my horse, and rode harder than I ever have in my life. I talked to you the whole way, told you about everything I could think of, willing you to hold on. And I did hold on," Beatrice said, "because somewhere, even in that frozen darkness, I heard your voice and knew I was safe. The second I got you in front of the fire, warming you up, watching color come back into your face, I knew my life had changed. I did not understand it then, but I knew. You were meant to be there. I was meant to find you. We were meant to be together," Beatrice corrected. "Everything else, all the pain and hardship that brought us to that moment, it was worth it to find each other." Marcus kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "Everything I have, everything I am, I would give it all again just to have you. You are my heart, Beatrice. You always will be." The years continued to roll by, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch passed primarily into Matthew's hands, though Marcus still advised and helped where he could. Beatrice's garden became legendary in the area, producing more than seemed possible from the semi-arid soil. She attributed it to love and persistence, the same things that had built her marriage. In 1910, the town of Las Cruces threw a celebration for Marcus and Beatrice's 35th wedding anniversary. It was a testament to how beloved they had become in the community, this cowboy and the woman he had saved from the snow all those years ago. Their love story had become local legend, told and retold, embellished, but always true at its core. At the celebration, the mayor of Las Cruces gave a speech praising their contributions to the area and their example of enduring love. Marcus and Beatrice stood together, embarrassed but pleased, their hands clasped tight. When it was his turn to speak, Marcus kept it simple. 35 years ago, I found the love of my life half frozen in a snowbank. I thought I was saving her, but the truth is she saved me. Everything good in my life comes from her. So thank you, Beatrice, for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for building this life with me. You are my everything." The crowd applauded, but Beatrice only had eyes for her husband. She stood on her toes to kiss him, not caring that everyone was watching, and he swept her into his arms just like he had when they were young. More years passed, each one precious. They watched their grandchildren grow and marry, welcomed more great-grandchildren, and saw the ranch continue to prosper under Matthew's management. Their love never faded, never grew stale. They still held hands on the porch at sunset. They still stole kisses when they thought no one was watching. They still looked at each other like they were the only two people in the world. In the spring of 1915, as new life burst forth all around them, Marcus and Beatrice took a ride out to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. The rock formation was still there, weathered but standing, a silent witness to the moment that had changed both their lives. They dismounted and stood together, looking at the place that had been the beginning of everything. Beatrice was 70 now, Marcus 72, but they still rode together whenever weather and health permitted. "I think about her sometimes," Beatrice said softly. "The woman I was that day, so scared, so alone, thinking she was going to die in the middle of nowhere with no one to even mourn her. If I could go back and tell her what was coming," Marcus said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Tell her that a cowboy was about to find her and fall madly in love with her, give her a family and a home and a lifetime of happiness. You think she would believe me?" Beatrice leaned back against him, still fitting perfectly in his embrace after all these years. "No, I do not think I could have imagined this, not even in my wildest dreams. It is too good, too perfect. But I would have been grateful to know hope was coming." "Hope did come," Marcus murmured against her hair, "in the form of you. You were my hope, my salvation, my everything. I was the one who was saved that day, Beatrice. You just did not know it yet." She turned in his arms to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "We saved each other. That is the real story. A cowboy and a woman in the snow, both lost in different ways, who found each other and built something beautiful." He kissed her then, deep and true, and it was like the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears. "Come on," Marcus said, taking her hand. "Let us go home." Home, such a simple word, but it encompassed everything. The ranch house Marcus had built with his own hands, the land they had worked together, the family they had raised, the life they had created from nothing but love and determination. It was all home, and it was all theirs. They rode back together as the sun set behind them, two figures on horseback silhouetted against the brilliant sky. Behind them was the place where their story began. Ahead was the home where it had unfolded. And between them, in clasped hands and shared glances, was the love that had made it all possible. That night, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren at their usual Sunday dinner, Marcus stood and raised his glass. The room quieted, everyone turning to look at the patriarch of this large, loving family. "I want to say something," he began, his voice still strong despite his age. 33 years ago, I found a woman dying in the snow. I brought her home, and she stayed. We married, built this ranch, raised a family. But that is just the facts, the bones of the story. The truth is bigger than that." He looked at Beatrice, his eyes finding hers across the crowded room. "The truth is that she was lost and I was lost, just in different ways. She had nothing, and I had everything except what mattered. When we found each other, we became whole. Every good thing in this room, every person at this table exists because of that moment, because I happened to take a particular route home. because she happened to still be alive when I found her. Because we both had the courage to take a chance on love." He raised his glass higher. "So here is to chance, here is to courage, here is to the woman who gave me everything, including her heart. Here is to my Beatrice, the love of my life, then and now and always. To Beatrice." The room echoed, glasses raising in salute. Beatrice smiled through her tears, standing to go to her husband. He pulled her close, and their family erupted in applause and cheers. This was what they had built together, this loud, loving, chaotic family. This was the legacy of a cowboy who gave a freezing woman his coat, his home, and his heart. The years continued their relentless march, but Marcus and Beatrice faced them together as they always had. They grew older, moving slower, their bodies wearing down from decades of hard work and full lives. But their minds remained sharp, and their love remained strong. In 1920, as they approached their 45th wedding anniversary, the family planned another grand celebration. But Marcus had a different idea. He arranged a trip for just the two of them, back to the spot where he had found her, on a day in January as close as possible to that original date. They rode out together, moving carefully but steadily. The years had been kind to New Mexico, and the ranch was more prosperous than ever. But none of that mattered as much as this, the two of them together in the place where their story began. They stood in the cold winter air, wrapped in warm coats, holding hands and remembering. So much had changed since that desperate day in 1882. The woman who had been left with nothing now had everything that mattered. The cowboy who had been alone now had a family that filled his world with joy. 38 years, Beatrice marveled. Since the day you found me, it seems impossible that it has been so long, and also like it was yesterday. Time is strange like that, Marcus agreed, but I would not change a single day of it. Well, maybe the days you were angry at me, he added with a small smile. She laughed, the sound bright in the cold air. I was rarely angry at you. You are too good a man to stay angry at for long. And you are too good a woman to deserve anything but the best. I just hope I gave you that. Beatrice turned to face him fully, her green eyes, faded but still beautiful, looking into his. You gave me life, Marcus. Everything else is just details. I was dying and you saved me. Then you loved me, respected me, partnered with me. You gave me children and a home and purpose. You made me feel valued every single day. How could you think you gave me anything less than the best? He cupped her face in his weathered hands, his touch as gentle as it had been 40 years ago. I just want you to know, before whatever comes next, that you are the great love of my life, the great adventure, the great joy. Everything I am, everything I have accomplished, it is all because you were by my side. And you were by mine, she whispered. My savior, my love, my partner, my home. You gave me everything, Marcus Zimmerman. Most of all, you gave me your heart, and I have treasured it always. They kissed there in the cold, two old people who loved each other as fiercely as they had when they were young. The wind whipped around them, but they held each other close, sheltered in their love. When they finally rode back to the ranch, their family was waiting, worried they had been gone so long. But Marcus and Beatrice arrived smiling, energized by their pilgrimage to the past. The anniversary celebration that followed was joyous, with 4 generations of family gathered to honor the couple at the center of it all. Stories were told, some true and some embellished, all celebrating the love story that had started with a cowboy finding a woman in the snow. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Marcus and Beatrice found themselves alone on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. They sat in their favorite chairs, hands clasped between them, comfortable in the silence. You know what I think about sometimes, Beatrice said eventually. I think about Raymond Thatcher, the man who left me to die, and I realize I do not hate him anymore. I did for a long time, but not now. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Why not? He nearly killed you. Because if he had been a better man, if he had kept his promises and married me like he said, I never would have been in that snow. I never would have been found by you. We never would have had this life. So in a strange way, his cruelty led to my greatest happiness. I cannot hate him for that, even though what he did was unforgivable. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this. That is a remarkably forgiving way to look at it. I am not forgiving him, Beatrice clarified. What he did was wrong, and I hope he faced consequences for it somewhere down the line. But I am choosing not to let his actions poison my happiness anymore. I spent too many good years being angry about the past. I would rather spend whatever years remain being grateful for what came from it. You are a wise woman, Beatrice Zimmerman, Marcus said softly. Wiser than I am. I still want to punch him if I ever see him. She laughed, squeezing his hand. I love you for that, for always wanting to protect me, even from things long past, but I do not need protection anymore. I have you, I have our family, I have this life we built. That is all the protection I need. They sat together until the stars were bright overhead, talking softly about their life, their love, their children and grandchildren. Eventually, the cold drove them inside where they banked the fire and prepared for bed. Moving through the familiar routines of decades together in bed, wrapped in each other's arms, Beatrice felt profound contentment wash over her. This was home. This was love. This was everything she had never dared to hope for when she was freezing to death in the snow all those years ago. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. For what? Marcus asked sleepily. For being exactly who you are, for finding me, for loving me, for giving me everything. He pulled her closer, his lips finding her forehead in the dark. Thank you for the same. Now sleep, my love. We have years yet to enjoy together. And they did have more years, precious ones filled with the richness of a life well lived. They watched their great-grandchildren grow, saw the ranch continue to evolve and prosper, and remain the loving center of an ever-expanding family. In 1925, as they both approached 80 years old, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The celebration was massive, with family coming from all over the country to honor them. The ranch house could not hold everyone, so they held the party outside, with tents and long tables groaning under the weight of food. Marcus and Beatrice presided over the festivities like the royalty they were to their family, greeting each person with genuine joy. They danced together, moving slowly but surely, lost in each other despite being surrounded by hundreds of people. Their eldest grandson, Matthew's boy who had been named after Marcus, stood and gave a speech that moved everyone to tears. He talked about growing up watching his grandparents, seeing the way they loved each other, and how it had shaped his own understanding of what marriage should be. They teach us that love is not just a feeling, he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. It is a choice you make every day. It is work and compromise and patience. But more than that, it is partnership and respect and genuine friendship. My grandparents did not just love each other. They liked each other. They were best friends who built an empire together, raised a family, and never lost sight of what mattered most. When it was time for Marcus and Beatrice to speak, they stood together, facing their enormous family with hearts full to bursting. 50 years ago, I married the most beautiful woman in the world, Marcus began. She is still the most beautiful woman in the world to me. But more than that, she is the smartest, kindest, strongest woman I have ever known. She took nothing and built something. She took a lonely cowboy and gave him a family. She took my heart and kept it safe for half a century. I cannot imagine my life without her. I do not want to imagine it. Beatrice took over, her voice wavering with emotion. I was left with nothing in the snow. A cowboy gave me everything. His coat, his home, his name, his children, his life. Most precious of all, he gave me his heart, and I have tried every day for 50 years to be worthy of that gift. Marcus Zimmerman, you are my great love, my great adventure, my home. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for keeping me. Thank you for loving me. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually Marcus and Beatrice slipped away, seeking the quiet of their home. They sat on their porch, watching the last of the sunset fade, holding hands as they had done thousands of times before. 50 years, Marcus said wonderingly. How did we get to be so old? By living every day together, Beatrice replied. By choosing each other again and again, by building this life one moment at a time. Would you do it again? He asked. If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you make the same choices? In a heartbeat, she said without hesitation. Every joy, every sorrow, every challenge and triumph. I would choose it all again because I would choose you. Always you. He turned to her, his eyes still sharp despite his age, still full of the love that had sustained them both for so long. And I would ride that same route home. I would find you in that snow. I would bring you here and fall in love with you all over again. Because you, Beatrice Vale Zimmerman, are the best thing that ever happened to me. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two old souls who had loved each other faithfully for 50 years. Around them, the ranch they had built hummed with life. Inside, their home held the memories of decades together. And in their hearts, the love that had started with a desperate rescue in the snow burned as bright as ever. The final years of their lives were peaceful ones. They moved slower, slept more, but still found joy in each day. They still took short rides when weather permitted. They still sat on the porch at sunset. They still held hands and told each other stories of their long life together. In the spring of 1928, Marcus's health began to fail. His heart, which had beaten faithfully for more than 80 years, was wearing out. The doctor said there was nothing to be done except make him comfortable. Their family gathered, knowing the end was near, but Marcus refused to give in easily. I am not leaving you yet, he told Beatrice stubbornly as she sat by his bed. We still have time. We have had a lifetime, she said gently, though her heart was breaking. A beautiful, full, perfect lifetime. If you need to rest now, I understand. But I will be leaving you alone, he protested weakly. Just like I was afraid of all those years ago when I was sick. Beatrice shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You could never leave me alone. You are part of me, Marcus. You always will be, and I will not be alone. I have our children, our grandchildren, all the family we created together. You gave me so much. You can rest now, my love. You have earned it. He reached up with a shaking hand to touch her face. I love you, Beatrice. From the moment I found you in the snow until my last breath, I have loved you. I always will. And I love you, she whispered. Thank you for everything. Thank you for my life. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for choosing me. Marcus died peacefully a few days later, surrounded by family, with Beatrice holding his hand. She sat with him for a long time after, not ready to let go, remembering the vibrant, strong man who had saved her life and given her everything. The funeral was enormous, with people coming from all over to pay their respects to a man who had been beloved in the community. But for Beatrice, it was a blur. She moved through it numbly, accepting condolences, seeing the grief on her children's and grandchildren's faces, but feeling hollow inside. The days after were the hardest. The house felt empty without Marcus's presence. The bed was too big, the silence too loud. She found herself talking to him anyway, telling him about her day, seeking his counsel on decisions even though he could not answer. But gradually, With the support of her family and the memories of a lifetime together, Beatrice began to heal. She realized that Marcus had been right. He had not left her alone. He was in every corner of the ranch, every memory, every face of their descendants. His legacy lived on in the land he had worked, the horses he had bred, the family he had raised. Beatrice lived for 3 more years, continuing to be an active part of her family's lives. She told stories of Marcus to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive. She taught her great-grandchildren to ride, to garden, to appreciate the land their grandfather had loved so much. On a warm spring day in 1931, Beatrice took one last ride out to the place where Marcus had found her. She was 86 years old, frail but still determined. Her great-grandson Matthew accompanied her, worried but respecting her wishes. She stood at the rock formation where it had all begun, feeling Marcus's presence strongly. In her mind, she could see him as he had been that day, young and strong, wrapping her in his coat, his eyes full of concern. She could feel his arms around her as he lifted her onto his horse, hear his voice talking to her all the way back to the ranch. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind, to the memory, to the spirit of the man she had loved for nearly 50 years. "Thank you for giving me everything. Thank you for your heart. I kept it safe, just as you kept mine. I will see you soon, my love." That night, Beatrice died peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face. Her family mourned, but they also celebrated, knowing she had lived a full and beautiful life, that she had loved and been loved in return. She was buried next to Marcus on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The entire community turned out for the funeral, paying tribute to a woman who had come to them with nothing and left behind everything that mattered. At the service, their eldest grandchild spoke about his grandparents' love story. He told about the cowboy who found a woman in the snow and gave her not just his coat and his home, but his entire heart. He talked about how they had built a life together based on mutual respect, genuine partnership, and deep, abiding love. He reminded everyone that their legacy was not just the ranch or the family, but the example they had set of what love could be. "They showed us that love is not just romance, though they had plenty of that," he said. "Love is choosing someone every day. It is working together toward common goals. It is being each other's safe place, each other's home. It is giving everything and receiving everything in return." They had that, and because they did, all of us exist. All of us are part of their love story. The years rolled on, and the ranch continued to be worked by their descendants. The house Marcus built still stood, now full of the laughter of new generations. The story of the cowboy and the woman in the snow became family legend, told and retold, a reminder of where they all came from in the town of Las Cruces. People still talked about Marcus and Beatrice Zimmerman, about how he had found her dying in an unseasonable blizzard and given her everything, about how their love had been the foundation of one of the area's most successful ranches, about how they had shown everyone what true partnership looked like. But more than any of that, their story lived on in the hearts of their family, in the values they passed down about hard work and integrity, in the example they set of choosing love every day, in the ranch that still bore their mark decades later. They had started with nothing, a desperate woman and a lonely cowboy, and built an empire of love. She had been left in the snow with nothing. He gave her everything, including his heart. And together, they created a legacy that would last for generations, a testament to the transformative power of love, kindness, and two souls who found each other exactly when they needed to most. Their graves on the hill overlooked the land they had worked together, the home they had built, the legacy they had created. And on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the grass, it was easy to imagine them still there, hand in hand, watching over the family they had started, the love that had never died. This was their story. A love that began in desperation and grew into something beautiful and lasting. A partnership that weathered every storm and emerged stronger. A legacy built not on wealth or power, but on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the simple choice to love each other well every single day. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not how they started, but what they built together. Not what they had been alone, but what they became as one. She had been left in the snow with nothing. A cowboy gave her everything, including his heart. And together, they created a love story for the ages, one that would be remembered and treasured by all who came after them. Their love had been the foundation, and on that foundation, generations would continue to build, carrying forward the legacy of Marcus and Beatrice Zimmerman, two souls who found each other in the snow and never let go.